Nobody caught this wardrobe mistake in Pretty Woman until years later. The modern adult version of Cinderella, Pretty Woman, is one of the most famous love movies of all time. It's also a movie about big dreams in Hollywood. The movie itself became a big Hollywood dream come true when it became an instant hit that people all over the world loved. If this is one of your best movies, here are some hidden facts and rumors that were said on the set. Movie fails. People watch movies and notice the funny mistakes that are in them. Even Pretty Woman does this. The audience notices a mistake when Vivian unties Edward's tie and then leaves the room for a second. When she comes back, Edward's tie is still in place. More movie fails. When Vivian ate a croissant 1 minute and then turned it into a small pancake the next, this was another mistake that was found. The dress in red. It was meant to be black, not red, that Vivian wore to the opera. Marilyn Vance, who designed the costumes, luckily had a different thought. She knew a red dress would make people look twice, but a black dress wouldn't. Still, Vance made 3 dresses for that scene, and in the end, the red one was best. Other actors versus Richard Gere. A lot of other stars wanted to play the part of Edward that Richard Gere plays, and everyone says that it was a great choice. People like Denzel Washington, Christopher Reeve, John Travolta, and Daniel Day-Lewis were among them. All of them tried out, but Richard Gere was picked by the casting director. However, the director, Gary Marshall, had his heart set on one man to play Edward. People tried to get in touch with Al Pacino many times, but he always said he was busy. Interesting fact. In a scene where Julia Roberts and Edward were close, she was so worried that a vein in her forehead stood out. That was so clear that director Gary Marshall stopped the shooting and massaged Roberts' head until the vein went away. Gere's first thoughts. It wasn't very interesting to Gere to play Edward Lewis. He said, just put a suit on a goat and put him out there. A note of romance. The producer called Richard Gere while he was thinking about whether to take the part of Edward. The producer asked him if he was sure he wanted to do it. At the time, Gere was talking to Julia when she handed him a note that said, "Please say yes." He smiled and decided to take her up on the offer. Getting Julia to laugh. There are many things that directors have to do to make sure that the scene turns out the way they planned. That scene where Vivian lies on the floor and watches I Love Lucy was one of these times. To make Roberts laugh, director Gary Marshall walked over and began tickling her feet. That made Julia feel better because she was bored. Bath bombs. To film the bubble bath scene, Julia dove under the water. Gary Marshall, the director, thought it'd be funny if everyone left the set quickly so that Julia's head would be the only one left when it showed up again. Marshall was known for pulling funny tricks on people. Another interesting thing about the bubble bath is that the workers used so much soap to keep the bubbles going that Julia's hair dye started to run. That day they had to change the color of her hair. What a soak! Red lipstick and a red outfit. The rules for the outfits in Pretty Woman are very strict. It's hard to forget the shopping scene from the movie. The most well-known outfit is the red dress. One old red jacket, on the other hand, was only $30, and the costume staff bought it on a street corner. Night at the Opera. A movie was going to be made of Edward and Vivian's night at the opera at the San Francisco Opera House, but there was an earthquake in San Francisco right before the shooting, so the director and producers had to find a different place to shoot. They chose at the last minute to move to the History Museum next to USC. Placement of products. Of course, all sorts of named goods are often advertised in movies these days. That didn't happen often in the early 1990s. The makers of Pretty Woman did offer Ferrari and Porsche deals to be in the movie, but both companies turned them down, saying that their cars couldn't be linked to picking up women on the street. So Edward picked up Vivian and Nancy Gross's Lotus, which was her car. Poster with a fraud. Photoshop was still used in the movie business to improve the look of things back in the 1990s. The movie cover for Pretty Woman shows Richard Gere's hair is black, but in the movie it's gray. But Julia Roberts' body was an even bigger lie. It wasn't even her body. The body in the picture is Shelley Michelle, Julia's double. For the movie cover, Julia's head was put on top of Michelle's body. Drew for the part. Drew Barrymore wanted the part of Vivian because she had some drug issues and knew what the part was like. She was too young to be a service lady, which was sad. Drew was only 15 years old at the time. The Hitchcock move, director in a mask. People knew Alfred Hitchcock for the small parts he played in his movies. Gary Marshall thought, I can do that too. So the poor man in the scene where Edward is trying to find his way is Marshall. You can trust these scriptwriters. The producers agreed to hire Gary Marshall as director, but they also knew they needed to pay close attention to the story. So they gave the job to 3 writers: Robert Garland, Stephen Metcalf, and Barbara Benedict. More writers were hired to work on certain scenes after these 3 came up with the main idea. The movie did well because of all the great attention to detail. Good luck charm. Gary Marshall, the director, had one secret weapon: Hector Elizondo, an actor whom Marshall thinks of as his lucky charm. Hector was hired to play the hotel manager, but Disney Studios wouldn't give him the pay he asked for. Marshall paid the extra money because he didn't want to lose his good charm. Disney realized they were wrong after the movie did well, so they paid Marshall back. Getting dizzy on set. This is because actors usually have to be somewhere at a certain time during filming. On the set of Pretty Woman, the group worked non-stop and didn't have time to eat. Julia Roberts was no different. She was living off 1 avocado a day while they were shooting, so she got sick and passed out on the set. Marshall ran over, opened a can of tuna, and fed Roberts right then. Last scene. 9 times the last scene on the fire escape had to be filmed over and over again. Something would happen every time they tried to get the scene right. Sometimes Julia's shoes would slip off and Richard Gere's suit would get dirty from going up and down the stairs. Then they tried again, but this time opera music was blasting from a nearby house. And this time pigeons were flying all over the place. A follow-up. Pretty Woman became a classic and a fan favorite, so it made sense to think about making a follow-up. However, Richard Gere wasn't sure if it was such a good idea. In Tibet, he was traveling and talking to a monk in a cave. The monk asked him, "So when are you going to make Pretty Woman 2?" This made Richard think that maybe making a sequel wasn't such a bad idea after all. This is how Runaway Bride came to be in 1999. Experience on the set. Fans from all over the world rushed to Beverly Hills to see some of the famous places that were in the movie because it was such a big hit. They made a Pretty Woman VIP tour of Rodeo Drive, couples massage in the spa, and a show of some of the outfits at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel so that interested people could go there. Cash talks. Since it was the only hotel to let the movie crew film inside, the Beverly Wilshire Hotel also had the right to make money from the movie. When they went to other places, they all wanted a lot of money, which wasn't in the budget for the show. They most likely didn't plan on getting free advertising from being in the movie. Filming in real life. There were no sets in the studio. Instead, all of the filming will happen in real places because the makers and directed wanted the movie to be as real as possible. One of them was a restaurant in the middle of Los Angeles. The diner is called Cicada in real life, but Voltaire in the movie. A restaurant like this is also used in movies like Bruce Almighty and Indecent Proposal. It always takes place. The scene at the business dinner where Vivian tries escargot for the first time leads to a little something else. In Pretty Woman, Vivian picks up the escargot and throws it across the room, right into the waiter's hands. He tells them it happens all the time. Same servant, different movie. That's what Gary Marshall, who directed Princess Diaries in 2001, thought Princess Mia would do with the snail, and the waiter would catch it and say the same line. Voice from the South. Gary Marshall, the director, chose that Vivian should also be from Georgia because Julia Roberts was born there. That way, Julia's natural speech would be used in the movie and there would be no chance of her messing up. Ralph's last part. Pretty Woman was Ralph Bellamy's last movie before he died in November 1991 at the age of 87. He'd been nominated for an Academy Award and an Emmy. He He was on stage and in movies for 62 years. The song Pretty Woman is very important to his fans. Pretty Woman is still alive. Before they worked together on Runaway Bride, Julia Roberts and Richard Gere worked together on Pretty Woman. Julia Roberts, Hank Azaria, and Larry Hankin were all asked to be guest stars on Friends, which is one of the most popular sitcoms of all time. They all had different roles, but Pretty Woman fans got to see their favorite characters in one show. How Hank Azaria got started. Hank Azaria's first movie with words was Pretty Woman. You may know him as David, Phoebe's doctor boyfriend on Friends. He played a police officer looking into a crime at the start of the movie. Known fans. People still love the movie Pretty Woman all over the world. Of course, some famous people also love this movie. Britney Spears, the pop star, said that Pretty Woman was one of her favorite movies and that she likes to watch it over and over again. A teen star named Miranda Cosgrove also said she loves those old movies. In love with Shakespeare. In the romantic scene where Edward takes Vivian to the park, he reads her a Shakespeare poem. This made the date even more romantic. Spanish Fever. Pretty Woman was a big hit all over the world. There were, however, no bigger fans than those from Spain. Pretty Woman was the most popular movie ever shown in Spain. In Spain, the movie was shown 19 times, which you might find hard to believe. Are Spanish people really suckers for love? Who's going to play Vivian? Julia Roberts wasn't the only actress who wanted to play Vivian. Others who were considered for this part were Meg Ryan, Madonna, Kristen Davis, and even Sarah Jessica Parker. That was clear to producers and fans all over the world. Julia Roberts was the best of the best. Taking off on set. Based on what's been said, it's clear that making this movie was just as much fun as watching it. On set, jokes were being told all the time by actors, crew members, and even the director. In one scene, Richard Gere got naked and walked onto the set to help Julia Roberts, who was almost entirely naked the whole time. Gere stayed in his room during the shooting. Real-life joke. As we already said, making Pretty Woman was fun for everyone. One of the jokes that made it into the movie was when Edward gave Vivian diamonds. But just as she was about to take them, Edward pulled them back and snapped the box shut. Julia Roberts didn't see that coming. She was so surprised for a moment, and then she laughed out loud. Even though it wasn't in the script, that scene was so good that Marshall thought it should stay. How well the music did. The song of Roy Orbison called Pretty Woman was already a big hit in 1964, and the movie made it even bigger. The fact that the movie's name came from this song must have helped. The music from the movie went triple platinum, which means it sold 3 million copies. Roxette's It Must Have Been Love and other songs like it stayed on the Billboard charts for a long time. Jewels of Ruby. The WOW red dress matched its WOW jewelry. Director Gary Marshall wanted the necklace to be made of real diamonds and rubies so that it would look more real. That's why they used real jewelry in the scene. A well-known jewelry shop let them borrow the necklace, which was worth $250,000. The store was also a little worried, so they sent a guard to keep an eye on the item. Getting on Broadway. Fans of Pretty Woman must have been over the moon when the news came out in 2017 that the show would be brought to Broadway as a musical in the fall of 2018. The song's words were written by screenwriter J.F. Lawton and director Gary Marshall, who made sure they were as true to the movie as possible. Plan your budget. In many scenes, the movie crew had to use street lights instead of studio lights because they didn't have enough money for studio lights. Marshall said, "It was a little shadier. I had to shoot it quickly because we didn't have a lot of money." In the end, everything paid off, especially for Disney Studios. Scenes cut out. Some of the scenes that were shot didn't end up in the movie. Some had to be taken out, like the one where Vivian eats her fancy steak with ketchup from the package and the one where Edward almost fights with a gang. We missed a beautiful horse ride at sunset as well. Goof Ups. "Yeah, I'm gonna grab a cab with my $20 was meant to be Robert's line in one of the first scenes of the movie. Instead, she said, "Yeah, I'm gonna grab a crab with my 20 bucks." Gere replied, "Yeah, there are a lot of crabs out there." Drive Rodeo. Rodeo Drive in Beverly Hills has strict rules about shooting, so all the scenes that happen there had to be shot on Sundays. It looks like the shops on the street don't want to be bothered during the week during their normal business hours. Polo Match. The golf match was filmed at the LA Horseback Riding Center. Gary Marshall didn't know much about horses, so he had his son Scott film the scenes. Scene in a restaurant. The well-known snail scene was filmed at the Rex, which is now called Cicada. The dinner scene from Mr. and Mrs. Smith was filmed at the same eatery. The film's budget was pretty much endless, so Marshall could choose any place he wanted. Los Angeles. Vivian lives in a room in the Las Palmas Hotel in real life. The hotel is in the city of LA and it's still open for business. Former wife. We see Edward on the phone with a woman at one point. It turns out to be his ex-wife. Even though he seems to have everything, this scene shows that he still needs love in his life. It was hard for director Gary Marshall to use a key to open hotel doors, so he thought that Richard Gere's character would also have trouble with that. I Love Lucy. An episode of I Love Lucy is shown on TV for Vivian. "We wanted Vivian to enjoy what an average person enjoyed," Marshall said about this scene. Mary Marshall Kathleen. Kevin, Gary's daughter, was cast as the front desk clerk at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel. She's been in a lot of her dad's movies like New Year's Eve, The Princess Diaries, Valentine's Day, and plenty more. Getting ready. Julia Roberts had to do a lot of work to get ready for her part as Vivian. The wife of Gary Marshall worked in LA. Roberts would go to the free clinic to learn how to talk and act like Vivian in a real way. Breaking up. Roberts' dog, who sometimes came to the set, didn't like the love scenes between her and Gere. They had to do those scenes over and over because he barked so much.